welcome everybody to the Regulatory Processes Committee meeting, which we are continuing from yesterday. So welcome to those people that we've got with us today. Thank you to the staff who are supporting us. We're just going to get cracking into it because we did all the preliminaries yesterday in terms of our meeting procedure. We're picking up and we are going to hear from Ian. Thank you, Ian. You're welcome to either come to the podium or sit at the table. You do have 5 minutes, and that needs to include questions if you wish it to.
Thank you, councillors. My wife's family opened the Penthouse Cinema in 1975, and we've survived DVDs, we've survived streaming, we've survived COVID. But this proposal that's sitting on the table at the moment is probably the biggest threat to our business. It stops our customers coming to our cinema. We have 4 screens at our cinema. We have approximately a 100-seat cafe. On a busy night, we'll turn over in excess of 1,600 to 1,700 people coming through the business. Recently, with the Barbie Oppenheimer screenings, Saturday the 22nd of July, we had back-to-back full houses, which is probably the first time we've done it this decade. On that night, the 22nd of July, with the full houses, I went in and asked the audiences how many people came on a bike. So I did the 8 o'clock session. There were 430 people in the building. Only 4 people rode bikes to the cinema. That's just to give you an idea of what the demand is. Our demographic, our customers are the 40 plus. They don't ride bikes to go to movies. They might ride them in the weekend, they might go up Macra Peak. But to take out car parks is the biggest threat we've got. The average customer we find will travel in a group of 3.5, and they'll come along. So one car will bring 3.5 customers to the cinema on a night. They park, they go to us, they go to the Salty Pigeon, they go round to the Brooklyn bar, eat and drink at the establishments, go home, enjoy their nights. And that's what we need to sustain it. From the information we've given, there's 47 car parks are planned to be removed from the intersection of O'Hara Road to the top of the Brooklyn Hill. And really, my business isn't interested in what happens past there. We're only interested in our local community. Brooklyn is a unique suburb, but it's probably one of the strongest suburbs for hospitality. We have got 5 restaurants that work in Brooklyn, and the reason for that, and I'll put it down to one, that it's got a strong cinema in there. People come to the cinema, and as a business, we work as a cluster of operations. They come to us, we can't serve them, so they go to the Salty Pigeon, they go to the Indian restaurant, they go to the Brooklyn Bar and Grill. So all the businesses feed off each other. That's quite a good operation. Now, I'd like to turn to this document here. This is the consultancy document that was given to us on the 27th of June. It's a total joke. It says here that how do we get our information? We met with local businesses. Now, as a local business person, this is the first time we saw this document. So how can a council tell the people of Brooklyn, oh, we've met with the local business people, when they didn't? You know, Boffa Miskell walked in there, said, here, this is what's happening. And this has been sped through with undue haste. From the 27th of June, we're now here, the 8th of August, talking about what's going to happen. So it was undue haste. My understanding is when they went into the other restaurants and businesses around Brooklyn, they got a very cold response. And in fact, some of them have turned away. They don't even want to be involved in this process. I feel that we need to ensure that car parking is maintained and to use the council's own documentation that we understand. One of the council traffic planners has said that by having cars parked on the side of the roads makes it safer for vehicles and cyclists. So a narrower corridor stops the trucks getting up speed. It allows the cyclists and the other vehicles to move. So it's not increasing the safety. If anything, by removing the car parks, up from Todman Street up to the hill, it makes it more dangerous for the cyclists. We feel the trucks will slow down as it's narrower, and there hasn't been an incident that I'm aware of in the 25 plus years I've worked at the cinema of a cyclist being hurt. Maybe you've got the different data. We are installing EV chargers in our car park, and on that night I concerned there was 9 EVs in our 34 car park. So the move towards the electric vehicles is started, and I think the momentum will gain as the prices come down and vehicles become more easily accessible. But as I say, we have some serious business decisions to make about the life of the cinema, and by removing customers makes it a lot harder for a business like ours to survive. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. I am actually going to allow one very quick question from Councillor Calvert. You have run out of time, but I'm being a bit lenient.
Thank you.
Ian, is there a sweet spot? Is there something that, or have you had an opportunity to talk about what could be another type of solution other than saying no car parking? Is there an opportunity to work through to get a better solution?
I'm sure there is. Maybe like a cycleway, same for limited hours or something like that, so that when the traffic is flowing into town or something like that, I'm sure there could be a solution. It's not something I've thought about. I just see it as it's a perception that if people think it's hard to get parking in Brooklyn, they won't come. They'll go out to Petone where there is no car parking restrictions, there's no cycleways, and obviously the upper hut will benefit from these decisions.
I will allow one more question, because I think what you're saying, we do need to hear from the businesses. So, yeah.
So, Ian, I do understand the challenge of car parking, but if we just come to a solution at some stage in any ways, what time is a busy time for you and the businesses around there?
For us, we do 60% of our weekly business between 6 o'clock on Friday to Sunday. So we work on an 11 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 6 o'clock and 8 o'clock cycles, just depending on the lengths of the movies. But basically the weekends are our busy times.
Cool.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Your feedback is valued. Thank you. Right, and I should have said we've got apologies for late arrival from the Mayor and from Councillor Paul, both of whom are currently on council business. We'll now move to Matthew. Thank you, Matthew.
Sure, thank you. And I'll try and make it because I agree. Affected businesses and community groups. I nearly decided not to come and take up the 5 minutes because I'm not directly affected. I would love to use my bike more. I'd love to go by bus more, but I do go most times with a car, and I do find a car park somewhere, and I don't mind walking a bit to get to the cinema. That's by the by. I completely understand Ian's concerns, and that's really what I want to talk about a little bit behind that. So, look, I've had a look at the other submissions. I've seen that the few points I made about a particular safety issue down Ohiro Road to Aro Valley and how that might have been covered by others, so I hope that gets taken into account. But I'd just like to say a bit more about why I actually decided to come today and use a little bit more of my 5 minutes. So, look, I'm an economist by training. I'm a public policy working on sustainability issues for 30 years. I'm here in a private capacity, right? But that's my background. So I think a lot about proposal, but if you just give me a moment, I'll just talk through this. So I began regularly commuting in Wellington on a bicycle in the 1990s. It's just been great to see that the numbers grow over that time. You know, I'm a recreational cyclist, I'm a commuting pedestrian, I'm a bus user and a train user. So I think, so it's been great to see the progress we've made, but it's a huge challenge here. And I guess it's everybody's job to try and make this work. And what I'm really concerned about is how a lot of our processes are generating opposition like this, like my business perspective considered. Your question, did anyone really try and identify if there was another solution or another way of integrating the public transport, the cycleways, the parking from that business perspective? Now, over the course of the year, or seen things like design charrettes, the design and development phase, and actually get the participation not in some sort of public hearing or submission process where it gets more antagonistic. And you read, I don't envy you reading all those submissions. You can feel the passion and the heat coming through. Is that heat really necessary if there do exist the potential to fine-tune? Even though I'm an ardent cyclist and really keen to see us, make this climate transition, some of the points about over-engineering, some cost perspective, or just, yes, there's a change their behaviour, and we know from behavioural science that one-way street from attitudes to behaviour, it's often the other way around. Which have all these unintended consequences that other people have mentioned. So, but maybe we do. Standards are, et cetera, but do we really work through with users at that design phase? How would this work in practice? Try and find solutions that are appropriate to particular settings. So my concern is I go through that the way I get around Wellington and the movies I go to and things like that. But is there enough consideration to the whole network? You come off a cycle lane, what do you hit? You hit a channeling cyclists out of the traffic. There's a bloody great pothole right in the middle of the road where you drive to go there. That pothole was there for 10 weeks and riding bicycles everywhere, and I'd see infrastructure, but much more ability to get around as a cyclist. And so, are we drawing on those experiences? Because there are lots of people who what's happening overseas. So,
I was just to remind you that you probably do need to just make a few last points.
So, but
they've been very useful.
But that is the main point. Is there some? I'm participating in this. I'm starting it. First time I've ever participated. But is there some way we could get more of the work done earlier in the design phase, so it doesn't put you in the position you're in, and the affected people in the position they're in?
Thank you very much for making those really global, valuable observations. And it has been my experience that there is a sweet spot, and this is part of the process to get to it. But thank you for what you've added. Right, so I'll move to David Hill. Thank you, David. Oh, David.
Used to be neighbours.
We used to be neighbours.
Exactly. So
lovely to have you here.
Yeah, thank you. Like Matthew, first time submitter, and just my luck to be following a sensible cyclist. Yeah, and so thank you for your comments, because I think they're actually spot on, and I think at the heart of what my issue is, and my only complaint. I live on Ohiro Road, on the other side of the lights from the Penthouse Cinema. I'm one of the fortunate ones that can walk to the cinema, and I totally agree that it's an absolute anchor for that community. I've lived there for about 12 years now. And my issue that brings me here today is really about the removal of, I think it's the 47 car parks along there. Full disclosure, I use one of those car parks regularly. I have an inconvenient van, and my wife has claimed our one off-street parking space. And when I have had, and one of my first concerns is just the pressure that displacing those 47 parks will put on the local community. As I mentioned, I owned a van, and I swear, because I don't use it very often. So often I will park it somewhere, and I won't use it for 2 or maybe even 3 weeks. And I have people come out of their homes, cross the road, shake their fist at me, and abuse me for parking on their street. That's how people feel about it, and there's so much pressure around it. This hasn't just once. This is just me parking the van, and they've been watching. The curtains have been twitching, and as soon as I turned up again after 2 weeks, boom, they're out there absolutely having a go at me because I don't live on that street. They know that that doesn't belong there. So you multiply that by 47, and that's not going to do a great deal for community relations. Another point that I think it was actually Ian touched on is I've lived there, as I say, for 12 years. I'm not actually aware of any accidents, and that's a good thing. We don't want to see a cyclist injured, and I think it is partly because there is already a 30-kilometre limit in the area. I'm a card-carrying bus user from there into the city. And so my informal survey of rush hour traffic would suggest that a significant majority of the commuters that are cycling on that during rush hour are actually on e-bikes. And e-bikes, in my observation, I don't own an e-bike myself, but they seem eminently capable of doing at least 30 kilometres an hour, many more. You're looking for a practical suggestion, why don't you just extend the 30K zone to the top of the hill so that, because currently it stops almost outside my property, just about 100 metres up from the lights. If you extend it another couple of 100 metres past the bus stop there, where the hill starts to turn down, you've taken a big step there, I think, in that. And obviously, and again, referring back to Matthew's point, I think there's a risk of over-engineering. These things are expensive, not just in terms of the impact on the community, in terms of parking pressure, but they're expensive to put in. I think we're all surprised when we see the stories in there and say, took it, $2.3 million to put in a pedestrian crossing. What the hell? I could do that with a couple of mates and a working bee for cheaper than that. I'm also a little concerned, and I appreciate that there's this consultation process now, but I felt like the survey, and this is actually one of the reasons I cancelled a business trip to Christchurch, so that I really should have been at in order to be here, because I was actually a little surprised when looking at the survey, the data that was provided, which was very, very skimpy. It didn't provide hardly any detail on the number of people using it and so forth, because I'm assuming at some point there's going to be a cost-benefit done on that, and there's way too little data. And the question about do you want safer roads? It's like saying, well, do you want to be 5 kilos lighter, without pointing out that exercise and diet may be involved? And I'd really like to have a far more serious and quantitative discussion about what are the trade-offs that we're making in order to accomplish that goal. I'm 7 seconds ahead of
You are. I'll ask a quick question. When you say more robust data, are you suggesting we should at least give an estimate of the cost?
Well, not just the cost, because I know that can be hard, but on the number of people of using it, the number of cyclists that are using it, number of cars that are using it, and how that's broken down into particular peaks. I'd like to have information if there has been any accidents. As I mentioned, I'm not aware of any. That kind of data, so that instead of saying, do you want safer roads, it's more like, do you want to spend $1 million to, for 100 cyclists, and when there hasn't been an accident in 20 years. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that.
Thank you.
That's useful to
Good
know.
to see you.
Thank you very much, David. So move to Catherine. Is it Catherine or Katie?
I'm
Either.
officially submitting as myself, so it is Catherine.
Catherine, right.
That's what's on my birth certificate.
Right.
Good morning. I've lived in Brooklyn for over 30 years. I moved there because of the movie theatre, having been grown up in Kelburn. As you point out, I wear many hats in the community, but today I'm submitting as myself. The nature of this trial cycle lane was a trial cycle lane. It was a huge surprise to myself and many others that what was a trial cycle lane morphed into massive traffic changes around the rest of Brooklyn, which were unexpected, unconsulted on, unalerted, and actually made some people extremely angry, including me, because I work very hard in my community. The lack of consultation on this was also of some concern. I travel all around Wellington as part of my job. On any given day, I can be in Seatoon or I can be in Karori. And I manage, unlike some of my other people in the industry, do 85% of my job on an e-bike. So I'm a cyclist. But as a resident of Brooklyn, this was actually quite disturbing. My e-bike doesn't have suspension, it's an old school one, so speed bumps down a hero road, which I ride regularly, is going to mean I will have to take alternate routes. I don't want to use the footpath. I don't think that's an acceptable solution, but I don't support the use of speed bumps down there, or vertical deflection devices, I think somebody called them yesterday. I'm also not in favour. Well, I actually would like to take the council to actually take a bit longer to consider this drastic removal of parking between Todman, Ahero and Ahero Brooklyn. The social implications of removing that parking is huge, and for the sake of 164 cyclists Monday to Friday, which the majority are during peak hour, and 110 average cyclists Monday to Sunday, that's a massive social disruption for a limited number of people on bikes. And considering that the council themselves have admitted that the take-up hasn't been at a level that they were expecting. There's elderly people that live along there, and people, their carers and friends won't be able to visit with such ease, which will potentially lead to social isolation, which I'm sure isn't an outcome of better cycling. I'm not a fan of raised pedestrian crossings or courtesy crossings. Having just spent the last 8 weeks post-op, there's enough bumps and cracks in Wellington roads without adding more, to be quite honest. It's a very unpleasant experience driving around Wellington in pain. I don't support the removal or any changes to the bus stops. I do use Brooklyn Road a lot, and I notice there's a lot of people using the council flats. They get off with heavy shopping, they get off with kids, and that's a much easier access to the Berkeley Dallard apartments than getting off in Willis Street and then walking up Nairn Street. I find Metlink's attitude to efficiency quite sad when they should be about service. People only get on and off bus stops if they want to. Buses don't stop at them at every bus stop if there's nobody there. So I'm also opposed to the removal of the parking outside Sado Karate. The council spent a lot of money putting that ramp in there. And there is another wheelchair access where they spent a lot of money putting another gravel ramp around by the jetty. But the people from the Sado Karate yesterday who made a submission, I totally agree with them. And I think putting a bus stop there is just not using the resources and is a waste of money when there's perfectly good bus stops where there are. Pretty angry, actually, but anyway, that's me.
Thank you, Katie. Some of what you're saying we actually has been emerging as themes from submitters, so we are in a process which I do trust.
Yeah.
But thank you for your input, and I believe we have got a question.
Nuridan.
Yeah.
Thank you, Katie, for your submission. And my question would be, as someone who knows the community, who always listen, do you think there is any street that we can use to accommodate in case if we're losing any of the car park on the main road, like the Helen Street, some people suggested.
Helen Street's been suggested, but what are you expecting the people in Helen Street, the people who park there, to walk 250 metres along a walkway and then down some dangerous steps by a bus stop to cross the road? Is that the expectation? Isn't it easier for people to park closer to where they are? And it's pretty rainy, not today, but it's pretty rainy and wet in Wellington. And I mean, I ride in all weathers, but not everybody wants to do that. And not everybody wants to lug children and groceries miles away. Is that what you mean? I mean, I'm not averse to angle parking there, but I think you should talk to the people in Helen Street. But I also think there's actually better alternatives for that stretch where you want to remove 30 cars north of Todman Street.
Okay.
Because actually the council's own letters to us say that narrow roads make people slow down.
Basically, my question was if there is any other alternative that you think, but your point noted. Thank you.
Thank you. And that was a good question, Councillor Abdurrahman. Thank you, Katie. Right, now we're moving on to Alex. I've been seeing you waiting patiently. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you, Sarah. I've got some photos. I don't know if they're on the screen or not.
They are on they're on our screen.
Oh, they're on your screen, right.
Well, they're on my screen.
Yeah. Right, good morning, fellow councillors. I'm a long-time Brooklyn resident, cyclist, motorist and pedestrian, and I'm not just concerned, I'm angry that this rushed $6 million proposal will seriously affect the Brooklyn community and businesses. I do, however, support the proposed permanent uphill bike lane. We actually had more consultation for the temporary bike lane than we've had for this massive $6 million improvement. So my first slide is on Cleveland Street, where you're proposing to remove the 4 angle parks. I object to removing those parks, because parks are already in short supply in Brooklyn, and I use those parks to drop the children off at the childcare centre. And some suggestions have been made that the removal of these parks is for safety reasons. If you read your own accident statistics, there have been no accidents with vulnerable road users, cyclists or pedestrians in the last 5 years. I understand from Paul Barker, the reason for removing these angle parks is a request from Metlink because it's a bit of a pinch point. My suggestion to you is that the footpath there is 2.4 metres wide. If you move the curb 600 millimetres in, the cars would not jut out so much. And besides, the bus stop just uphill, which was built for the bus hub, is only 5.8 metres as well, and that's also a pinch point. Now we go to the next photo. Ohiro Road. A number of submitters have already raised the issue of shortage of parking in Ohiro Road. As a cyclist, I recognise the need to provide more space for cyclists. But there are 2 medical centres affected by the removal of up to 47 car parks. Last week, I had to park on Ohiro Road as the medical centre car park is full. I'm reasonably fit, but where are you suggesting that other patients who might be elderly or infirm are actually going to park if they're unable to get a car park at the medical centre? It's absolutely crucial to the Brooklyn community that these 2 medical centres continue where they are. My suggestion, therefore, is that I support a peak hour clearway to provide more space for cyclists during peak hours, and during the rest of the day have limited hours parking, because I accept there are some commuters who park here all day, and perhaps even throw in a few residential parks so that people who haven't got off-street parks can actually park their cars there. There are no spare parks in Helen Street, especially a note there for Nurudin, because your own parking survey shows that it's about 100% full most of the time. Next item I'd like to talk about is raised crossings. I'm totally opposed to the 4 raised crossings you're proposing to put on Brooklyn Hill. This is an arterial route with 16,000 vehicles a day, and it's crazy to actually suggest that you're going to expect all the trucks and cars to go over these. You're going to have more noise, pollution and congestion. My suggestion instead is to use speed humps which don't affect trucks or an at-grade traffic light. There are no raised crossings on Adelaide Road, Ridderford Street, so why are you proposing them on Brooklyn Road? Next, the proposed Nairn Street courtesy crossing. That's what this photo here is about. It's unnecessary and it's also unsafe. There is no legal requirement to stop for a courtesy crossing, and Koata guidelines state that it should be used in a low-speed environment like Kilbirnie Shops. This is not Kilbirnie Shops, and it's also supposed to be used for less than 7,500 vehicles a day, and you've got 16,000 here. The existing refuge is fine for competent or capable pedestrians, and for those who are not quite so able, there's a traffic light crossing just 50 metres down. The next one's already been raised by the previous submitter, Katie. The parks for the playground and Seido karate. I first took my children to this playground 30 years ago. I now take my grandchildren there. It's unsafe to take out 2 toddlers parking on the road. That car park there is ideal for taking out young children, and your own council maintenance staff actually park there when they're maintaining the playground. So leave the bus stop where it is, and you'll save yourself about $200,000 or $300,000. Next one is Washington Avenue. The drawings which were prepared, the design of the drawings was done by a transport graduate who graduated from the University of Canterbury in September 2021. He's obviously green but around the ears because he's proposing a new central refuge.
Please, if you don't mind, we won't be sagging off at the staff.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's not your staff. It's a good gentleman.
Oh, well, I don't mind, but
Okay.
let's respect people's...
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's say the new downhill refuge is in the wrong place. And I raised it with Paul Barker and he said, put it in your submission. 80% of the traffic coming down Washington Avenue turns right down the hill, and therefore the refuge will clash with the pedestrians. Leave it where it is, and also I object to the uphill bus lane being in lane because that will cause more congestion. So I've run out of time, so I better close off. Thank you, sir.
I've got one question of clarification. I wasn't concentrating well enough when you pointed to some technology that should only be used for less than 7,000 vehicles, and this has...
The courtesy crossing at Nairn Street.
Oh, okay, that's what it was.
Low speed situations, and that's not a low speed situation, and it's got too much traffic.
Okay, I certainly will just double check that. Thank you for raising that and other points. I have made some notes, so thank you very much, Alex.
Thank you.
Right, we will move to Donald Nording if he's available. Thank you, Donald.
Morning. Good morning. I'm Donald Nording. I've been living in Wellington for 8 years. I moved here from Japan. In Japan, I was a cyclist for 26 years. When I moved here, I stopped cycling. I'm not a pro cyclist. I'm not pro in this particular thing, but I have a vast experience in riding my bicycle in all weathers all year round. I have not owned a car in 30 years. I don't own a car. You can see my story on the Mevo website. I'm a poster boy for Mevo. I only use Mevo. And I park my Mevo outside of Brooklyn Dojo. That was pictured there almost every night. So if you go to Brooklyn Dojo between 5:30 and 7:30 on a Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday night when my daughter is training, as she has been for 7 years, you'll see me sitting in a Mevo on my phone watching some dumb video. And I really oppose taking those car parks out for many reasons, but particularly a lot of the members of our dojo, I'm not speaking on behalf of the dojo, I'm speaking on behalf of myself. A lot of members of our dojo aren't necessarily Brooklyn residents. They can't walk down. The buses that, I live actually on Victoria Street, and the buses that would go up to the dojo are irregular. My wife recently took the bus, and she had to wait over a half an hour for a bus to get to the dojo when she was taking my daughter there, so my daughter was late. Obviously you can walk if you have the time, but really my point is that this whole project is around safety. Safety comes up in about 7 different locations on the different reasons, and I would say that the cyclists going up and down the Brooklyn Road are the most unsafe cyclists I've ever seen in my life. The cyclists do not follow road rules coming down. There has been no consideration around patrolling the speed of cyclists in this project or in any other project. There's no talk or mention of policing cyclist speed. For example, my office is on the waterfront, unrelated to this, of course, but cyclists regularly exceed the 10 km/h speed limit that is on the waterfront. It's posted around Clyde Quay Wharf. And, me as a Mevo user is putting around, and then I'm getting dirty looks from cyclists because I'm following a speed limit. I think there has been zero consideration for that aspect of the project. I sit there, I can see the number of cyclists going up at 5:30, 6 o'clock. This is drive time, right? This is peak hours, 7 at the most during that time. I also think it's been very unsafe. That trial run was very unsafe because you've taken out the buffer. We've got a lot of big trucks going there. Those trucks are wider than the lane. The buses are wider than the lane. Often people are going over a solid white line in the middle of the road. Without that buffer there, it's impossible to avoid accidents. I think the most unsafe thing is having that cycle lane there, period. There shouldn't be a cycle lane at all on that road. It's not suitable for cyclists. Going down the hill, cyclists regularly exceed the speed limit. There's been no mention of that. I see cyclists tailgating literally 1 meter behind other cars because they're drafting. On a Saturday morning, 9 o'clock in the morning, you'll see cyclists drafting behind other vehicles. Not only is that frightening for a motorist, what would happen if the motorist would hit a speed bump? What would happen if there was something obstruction in the traffic to the cyclist? There's been zero consideration of that, and I would wish that you would consider that very strongly. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have a time for a question. I have one. How would you respond? And we have heard yesterday quite a lot of positive comment from cyclists that it does, in fact, make them feel safer. So, how would you respond to the fact that we've actually had a lot of positive feedback from the users?
Then you have your own lane. Of course, you're going to feel safer, but the issue is speed.
Okay.
The issue is not lanes.
Okay, the issue. Okay.
And the issue is really around people. The roads are for people. They're not for vehicles. They're not for cyclists.
Okay,
They're
so
not for pedestrians.
would it be fair to say you're suggesting quite a bit of education could?
Yeah, education,
okay.
but monitoring. You have to have enforcement. They have to have somebody there looking at cyclists on a Saturday morning, drafting behind cars and giving them tickets so they don't do it.
Okay. Well, thank you for that feedback.
Thank you.
Your time's appreciated. Jane, have we got Jane online?
Yep. Hi, I'm Jane. Kia ora. I'll just sort this out. I'm here to raise the critical issue of resident safety and access to key services with regard to the changes to the stretch of O'Hero Road between Cleveland Street and Brooklyn Road. The change removes 39 car parks from a small stretch of residential street and provides no safe alternative parking. This is my first ever submission, but I felt it was important to provide feedback due to what I, as a homeowner in this stretch of impacted road, see as serious unintended consequences of the current plan. So thanks for the opportunity to bring this to your attention. And just some context, my husband's a very regular cyclist, and I've been knocked off my bike and I've been hit walking by vehicles. So I get the importance of cycle and walker safety. However, resident safety is also of critical importance and can't be ignored. Next slide, please. So currently on the west side of the strip of O'Hero Road, there's 12 to 15 houses without on-site parking. Access to parking immediately outside these houses will be removed. So that's close and safe parking. Currently, from our place, it takes 20 metres walk to the car. That will become 300 metres or more, day or night. This raises serious safety concerns. Residents will find themselves needing to walk hundreds of metres to their car. Doing this at night, and we must admit there's a lot of night in winter in Wellington, goes directly against the #1 safety point on the police website, which I've highlighted here. Councils seem to have assessed cycle and walker safety, but not resident safety in their assessment. This seems inconsistent with Wellington's safe city status and needs to be addressed. Council really do need to provide viable alternative, safe, close parking solution for the residents impacted. Next slide, please. Thanks. So this is just to illustrate for people who might be unfamiliar with the area. So the blue bits where the houses are that are impacted without parking in O'Hare Road. Todman and Helen, by Council's own survey, shows that these are overfull with parking, on-street parking, and displacing 39 cars will only compound this issue. We did a random check the other day, and O'Hare Road parking was full, as it is in the week. And the only parks we could find was where the red crosses are. So that's between 300 and 500 metres away from these houses, and that's without the car parks being removed. And you can imagine what that means for essential services. Access will be severely compromised, getting tradies in, infrastructure work done, carers, etc. I genuinely don't know where they're going to park for these houses. I'm talking specifically about these houses because that's what I know, but there may be others impacted in the area. So if you could go to the next slide, please. I'm not an expert on this. I know that there's council expertise at looking at alternative solutions, but I did want to provide one suggestion, and that is that Helen Street is pretty wide, and I wonder whether we could put angle parking the whole way up the street to make more capacity for parking, and then create a residents parking area at the bottom of Helen Street for these specifically impacted households. There's A's and B's, etc. on this walkway, which is why there's 10 households in a small area. But provide that alternative parking, provide a loading zone park with extended hours to enable trades, etc., to get there, and ensure safety features such as adequate lighting along that walkway to residents' homes. So that's, I put some other suggestions in there as well, but those were my key points. So overall, my concern is that...
Jane, you'll just need to make your last final points if you don't mind.
Yep,
a couple of
sure.
things. Yeah.
By not providing a safe, close parking alternative, Council are genuinely putting residents in a position where they will need to make unsafe choices per the feedback I've given. So my ask is that you take these serious safety concerns and access concerns into account and amend the plan to resolve these issues. Thanks for your time.
And thank you for yours. It's really appreciated, and thank you for your feedback. Some of those themes have already come out, and we'll do our best to follow them up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was good.
Right, we'll move to... so we're just waiting on someone. So actually, Katie, if you're ready, wearing your other hat. Yes, so we're now hearing from the Greater Brooklyn Residents Association.
I'd like to introduce you to Alex, who's on our committee.
Hi, Alex. No.
That's okay.
Not at all.
Right, set the start. Right. Okay, first of all, we'd like to start off by saying We had excellent consultation with the council over the safety improvements at the Brooklyn traffic lights. We had multiple meetings. A lot of our suggestions were taken on board, and the end result is very positive for everybody in Brooklyn and all the traffic that goes through. Disappointingly, this $6 million project has been the opposite. We first heard about it when the 4-week statutory notice was given. 2 weeks of that occurred during the school holidays. We had complaints from residents saying, why did you consult during the school holidays? We didn't get why is the consultation period in the school holidays? We didn't get a choice. It was lumped on us. We did manage to hold a couple of meetings. We didn't have time to do a proper survey. The result of the meetings was that the overall impression was that the majority were against the proposals. There wasn't the opportunity to discuss them with council officers. Council officers didn't have spare copies of the drawings. The whole thing was done in a big rush. The next thing I'd like to talk about, and I've already shown it in my photograph, is the removal of car parks in Cleveland Street and O'Heroes Road. And multiple submitters have expressed concern about that, and suggestions have been made that a peak hour clearway is a possibility. We can't carry on with the situation where people are at risk of having to walk 300 metres at night because they can't park outside their house, and therefore a suggestion of being able to park there in the evening and having space during the day for cyclists, I think, is a positive one. Also, the access to the medical centre is absolutely essential. Sorry, there's 2 of them, not 1. We're also not happy with the 4 raised crossings, and you can probably see I'm on the executive of the Brooklyn Residents Association, so I helped them with their submission. We don't see that they're necessary. We raised them with the council. We were told that they were to improve safety. We're not aware that the pedestrian accidents have been caused by lack of a raised crossing. The next thing we'd like to talk about, and we've got 2 minutes, 28 seconds left, is we think you're wasting your money putting speed humps down O'Hero Road. It's not a suitable road for less confident cyclists. It's steeper, it's slippery because it's shaded, and it gets wood debris from the trees, and at the bottom it's narrower going onto Aro Street with a horrible right-hand crossing. I don't use it, and I'd class myself as a confident cyclist. So scrub that. Instead, why don't you look at putting a footpath on the west side from the junction with Brooklyn Road down to Tenera Crescent, so that all the kids who use the playing fields there have got a safer walking access. Finally, in the short time that's available, and I'd recommend that you read our very detailed submission, which took a lot of work to do, I'd like to talk about the Washington Avenue situation. And as I've already raised there, we've got serious concerns regarding the central refuge being moved downhill, because I'm adamant it's in the wrong place. And I've explained why. The logical place is to leave it where it is. Let's just talk a little bit about that uphill bus lane. We're absolutely gobsmacked that you're proposing to have an inline bus lane which will halt all the traffic. The traffic already banks up there in the evening rush hour. You're now suggesting that the rest of the day traffic should bank up there. You're asking fully loaded trucks to do hill starts. There's going to be more pollution, more noise, more congestion. Isn't that what we're trying to avoid with climate change? I think we'd leave it at that and recommend. Sorry, you wanted to say something?
Just one final. We'd like to invite the Regulatory
that's right.
Committee to come to Brooklyn and take a walk around with us so we can point out exactly what it is that you are going to be voting on. And secondly, we would like to request that the 4 sections be divided up and voted on separately, just in case you might be anti-speed bumps on a Hero Road but pro doing the cycle lane bit. So, yeah, you're welcome to come to Brooklyn and have a walk around with us.
Thank you. Actually, we had come to the conclusion the committee will be doing a site visit. We normally try to, but it's absolutely essential that we do.
For a walk around with us.
Yeah. Well, we will take the opportunity to go with our staff. Yeah. Now, do we have any questions? Councillor Calvert.
I wasn't sure we'd have time, but it's not just here, but it's in other areas around the city that I'm just hearing that we are not working with the communities on a cohesive, holistic solution, and just taking that little bit longer to come. I mean, what's your views on that?
We're the Residents Association, and our executive has got a mix of views, and our submission takes into account those views. And I guess the feeling is that we're disappointed that with such a major change to Brooklyn that the association wasn't included in the design phase. And we understand that Living Streets Wellington were consulted, that the cycle network were consulted, but not the Residents Association. It's just, don't understand it.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you for that feedback. It's very appreciated.
Thank you, Sarah.
Right. We will move. Is Christoph here? No. Okay. We'll keep going. Sam, possibly online.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning, Sam. You have 5 minutes. It will go fast.
I'm hoping I can share my screen, but it seems to be disabled. Is that possible?
We'll just look into that for you.
I have emailed the PDF to Democracy Services if it's easier just to quickly load up that PDF.
Yeah. Just, take a moment.
So I'll just start by saying...
Here we go. Thank you.
Okay, it's come up. Cool. So is my video working?
It looks like it is.
Okay, kia ora, committee, Sarah, thanks for hosting and chairing, enabling this participation. Just to point out, this is obviously a personal submission. I am on the committee of the Greater Brooklyn Residents Association. Thanks to Alex and Katie for representing the committee. I would like just to quickly touch on the fact that I would hope councillors would read the submission because it's not quite as simple a community viewpoint as was perhaps represented just before. So I just encourage people to read the full submission and to reflect on the fact that there's only a very small proportion of the community that we're able to be engaged with by the Residents Association. So obviously only a couple of minutes here, so just wanted to very quickly, we can just flick to the next slide. Second slide. So I've been, closely involved in and watching the development of this project from the first pop-up trial, and very excited to see the trial and the change and the huge improvement in safety as we've gone on, and generally just incredibly supportive of turning this temporary pop-up lane into a permanent project. You can flick to the next slide. Due to the brief time, I just wanted to reflect on a couple of things that I think could be explored further before implementation. I think there's a great opportunity for improved walking connection and pedestrian safety by connecting the footpath effectively between Main Street and Bidwell on the eastern side, inside of the cycle lane. Flip to the next slide. Similarly, fantastic potential for the project and potentially one of the greatest safety improvements that could be seen in the area for pedestrians would be a footpath linking Bidwell Street to the bottom of Washington Ave. It seems there's plenty of road width and in the scale of cost of the project, this would be a great addition, and potentially if there can be other savings made by some of the things that are seen as potentially a bit contentious and less desirable by some members of the community. Potentially some of that funding could be redirected into improving pedestrian connections. Some people are probably already aware of the vast numbers of particularly high school students that cross Brooklyn Road in the morning and the afternoon, currently generally not using pedestrian refuges because they're not in convenient locations, and in this proposal actually become less convenient. Pedestrian connection between Bidwell Street and the bottom of Washington Ave would dramatically minimise the number of crossings of Brooklyn Road that students would have to do. And the existing pop-up cycle lane is already being used by pedestrians and e-scooter riders coming down. So I think a clearly delineated raised pedestrian link here would be fantastic. We can just go to the next slide. So the last thing I just wanted to quickly touch on is obviously just right on the edge of the scope of this project, but so just locating us here, we're at the intersection of Cleveland Street and Washington Ave. So the Brooklyn School is just to the south off the slide. So this is obviously the number 7 bus route, busy, popular bus route, and only going to get busier as Brooklyn and southern suburbs intensify and develop over the years with the MDRS, etc. There's currently a safety issue with vehicles needing, whether they're buses, cars, or cyclists or anybody pulling out from Cleveland Street across Washington Ave traffic. There's poor visibility. You're doing a hill start. Potentially the raised crossing only makes it more difficult. I think there's a great opportunity here to slow southbound traffic as it approaches the school, and to give bus priority and cycle priority heading towards the cycle lane by making Cleveland Street and Washington Ave continuous, having a stop sign on Washington Ave as you approach from the south, and a give way for northbound traffic on Washington Ave. And so I'd just like to open up for questions.
Thank you, Sam. I actually do want to ask you about the bus stops in particular, because I can remember us being engaged on that process back in 2018. Are you generally supportive of the changes to the bus stop on a highway road?
Yeah, I don't see any major problems.
And the other bus stop changes, given that we've had a lot of feedback about the one opposite the social housing area.
Yeah, I mean, I must say I haven't spent too much time deliberating on the detail of the bus stops. I think the ability to unpair bus stops is a good one. If the regional council are prepared to not worry about them always being matched across the road, I think unless you're in a kind of hubbing situation where people are getting off and crossing the road to change directions, then it's much less relevant. As long as there's good pedestrian crossing opportunities, which this proposal includes anyway, then I think there's much less need to pair up uphill and downhill, north and south bus stops, because people aren't getting off a number 7 or a number 17 and crossing the road and getting on it to go back the other way immediately. I just can't see situations of it happening.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? Yes, we have one from Councillor Abdurrahman.
Kia ora, Sam, and thank you so much for bringing different perspectives. And as you said, in the community, it's obvious that to some extent there is a bit of division. And if there is anything that you would like to improve to minimize that tension, what that would be in this plan?
Well, I think, Alex and Katie both reflected on the slightly odd situation of the Residents Association and the community not being engaged between the pop-up and the proposal to make it permanent, which was a little odd. I mean, I was part of the initial working group. And, we had a community workshop with, council engagement people and designers and a cross-section of the community back at the pop-up stage. And so it was odd that process wasn't continued. So I think that dropping that process, which was described as being, implicit in the NZTA or Katahi funding at the start, was surprising to the community and instantly kind of creates a bit of division. And I think I'm not quite sure why that process was abandoned, but I think going forward and for other projects, it shouldn't be.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sam. We have really well and truly used the time, but thank you
Sure.
for all your feedback. Moving
Thank you.
on, I guess I should just ask if we've got our person that didn't turn up. No, okay. We're now then up to Susie.
Mōrena koutou, ko Susie Robertson toku ingoa, e tipu aki au e te awa kairangi, e te rohi o te Aotearoa, e nai nei noho ana au ki tūranga riri ki Pōnaki. Morning, my name's Susie Robertson and I've been a Brooklyn resident for over 5 years now. I live close to the amazing space that we call the Vogelmorn Bowling Club. And I'm here today not to speak as the new Kaiarahi CE of Kaibosh. I am just here as me, Susie, a Brooklyn resident, mother, wife, dog, mum, and mixed model commuter. So a typical week for me would involve me biking to and from work, up the Brooklyn Hill or down the Brooklyn Hill 2 times a week. I generally walk once or twice, and then I'll either take my car or I will be dropped off by car or, on the odd occasion, as a pillion passenger on my hubby's motorbike. I occasionally catch the number 7 bus, but it's usually home after events. I'm relatively new to biking. I started about 3 years ago when I was working for Sustainability Trust, and I have an older mode e-bike that doesn't go very fast uphill. My experience of biking using the cycleway has been amazing. Riding from Sustainability Trust on Foresters Lane up Tory Street across town would see my adrenaline spiking, and I would physically let out a sigh of relief as I reached the cycle lane at the bottom of Nean Street. It's clearly marked. There are some good spots to pass, or be passed, in my case, and there is enough separation between bikes and other motor vehicles, in particular being separated from those trucks heading up to the landfills. I haven't got stats, but for me, over that time, I've seen a lot more people biking with the kind of uptake of e-bikes. I've been pleased to see in the plan that the car parks on Ohoro Road near the Brooklyn shops will be removed, as it's hard for cars to pass bikes safely here and it slows everyone down. It's also not a safe place to park and then walk as a pedestrian along that stretch of street. There's just not enough room. I'm pleased to see that one of the bus stops has been removed along that stretch heading south, as it will also help the flow of traffic. I'm pleased that as a pedestrian there is a walkway plan between the bus stop near Bibble Street connecting to the Nean Street car park, as that's a really, really tricky spot for pedestrians. I'm also pleased to hear that community consultation with the Central Park flat residents will hopefully mean that the bus stop will remain outside their building. Whilst as a cyclist it may mean having to slow down or stop, that stop is definitely needed to service those residents to ensure their quality of life and access to transport exists. I was unsure from the plan exactly what is happening around the bus stop pedestrian cycle access at this stop near the Malaysian Embassy. As a cyclist, I would rather stay on the road than share the skinny, often debris-laden footpath with pedestrians and passengers exiting the bus. My last ask is that the road marking that has a temporary fixed, that has been temporarily kind of painted over, be fixed. I'm going to hand around this piece of paper and you see if you can figure out which, sorry I didn't get this in on time, but yeah, figure out which double yellow line is the actual double yellow line. But my final remark is well done, councillors. I appreciate that it isn't easy to get cycleways across the lane, but it is essential for the future of our planet and for the health benefits of our ever-increasing sedentary population and to make our city streets less congested so that those that do need to get around can do so with ease. So thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Susie. We've got time for one or two. Councillor McNulty.
I was just wondering if you're aware of the council's Transport Projects website that actually has the counters for cycling uptake?
No.
No. So, I mean, I can give you the figures. We're up 30% year to date on trips further uphill than we were last year. But there is a public website with every counter and you can look at all the individual details. So if you want to touch you offline, I can give you that link.
That would be amazing. Thank you.
Thank you, Susie. Have we got? I think we've probably come to roughly to the end of our time, but your feedback is appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you.
Nice to hear positive feedback too, as well as suggestions.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Right. Andrew. Oh, withdrawn. So we're up to Fador. Fador online, maybe, or here. Someone's just come in. Yeah. It's a lady. It's okay. I think we might take a break at this point, and if some of our speakers come later, we'll fit them in. So we're going to take a break till 1:45. It's a short break, but yeah, and we'll see everyone back here at 1:45. Thank you for your attention. Oh, and I do need to table or mention apologies from Liz have been received for today. She may come later if she can. or those who are interested in being at the table sitting, please. I think we've got just about everybody. Right. I would like to welcome, who are we up to? Alex Dyer, online. Kevin. No? Alex will be here shortly. Okay. Oh. So we haven't, what about, I'll just check. Sorry, just take a brief break while I just check with my advisor. So we've got Andrew didn't come. Wasn't here. Kevin. Okay. Alex will be here shortly. Okay. Okay, well, let's hear from them. All right, we've made a decision. We do have Ian and June here. We're a bit ahead for you, but is it all right if we hear from you now? Well, we'll have Ian first. Look, if you're happy to, yeah, I don't mind. Training.
Good morning. Hi. I'm Ian Patterson. I'm a resident of Brooklyn. I'm a member of the Brooklyn Northern United Junior Football Club Committee and a member of the Greater Brooklyn Residents Association and also the A to B group. And my comments are, I'm sure, liking the biking, but I want to be talking the walking because I don't think the walking's had a really good focus, and I want to draw attention to some key walking areas in Brooklyn. And that's what I've done here on this map. And the green tack, it's not blue tack, is the walkways that I'd like to see developed.
Ian, can I just invite you to come a bit closer, even if you're on one side? Maybe come up to Councillor McNulty, because I don't know about the rest of the committee, but I would be able to see it a whole lot better if you came a bit closer. Oh, we do have it online.
Oh,
yeah, but yeah.
Hold it for you. Oh, all right, thanks, yeah.
Thank you.
Right, okay. So one important walkway coming out of Brooklyn is the traffic to the colleges. So there's Wellington College, there's Wellington East Girls College, and there's Wellington High School, and there's the Polytech, and there's also that road from Bibble Street takes you down to the hospital as well. So all that traffic going from the top of Bibble Street down there needs a good walkway access. And so the proposals are to put a walkway from Washington Ave round to Bibble Street. And that's been talked about this morning, and that's the link there from the red sticker round to the other, in the middle, to the red sticker on the left-hand side, yeah. So that's that loop there. And just above that loop is, I've also shown a walkway to come through from Bell Road down to Woodville Street. So some people coming down Washington Ave can either go through Heaton Terrace and then wind around Bell Road and end up in Bibble Street. And so that's the walkway just above that one, and then just below it from Washington Ave, where the red sticker in the middle, at Washington Ave, and take it round the curve and round to Bibble Street. And once they're in Bibble Street, at the top of that, they've got a footpath all the way through. But at the moment, those two green areas show where there are no footpaths. Also, just below the sticker for Bibble Street is a walkway that was suggested by Sam in his recent presentation, and that's the opportunity to bring a walkway from Nairn Street up to Bibble Street on the left-hand side of Brooklyn Road. The other area I want to focus on is over there on the other side, and you can see there those orange rectangles. They represent the area of Tenera Park. So the first one is the top park at Tenera Park is where the hockey is, and also the old Brooklyn Bowling Club, where there was martial arts and fencing. And then the next larger orange-looking block there, that's the lower Tenera Park, and that's where the juniors play both soccer and cricket. And then a bit further on, the lower orange area, that's the dog park, or if you like, the bark park. And all of those areas, people need to get to. And so then to get to them, they're coming down from the red triangle on the right-hand side, which is the top of Brooklyn Road and Ahira Road, the intersection there, and they're walking down Ahira Road, and they get to go to Tenera Park, they've got to get across Ahira Road. So the key thing there is to facilitate that and make it so, and make a crossing there to allow people from Brooklyn who want to go to Tenera Park for soccer, hockey, cricket, or dog walking to get down there and get across the road. They can't do it at the moment, and so what do? They take the cars, because there's a car park there. And that's really defeating the whole purpose. You know, we really need to focus on providing good walkways, sensible walkways, purposeful ones, and that's the suggestion there. So there's 4 walkways there, and they're on the diagram.
Thank you very much, Ian. You have really illustrated for us the points that quite a few other submitters have made, and I thank you for that. Are we actually able to keep the bigger picture? I could add it as an exhibit on our table. Or email, or have we got it in your submission?
There's a photo of it.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's good. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Now we will move. Were there any questions? I do feel like we've actually got a little bit of time up our sleeves because we've had about 4 people pull out. Yes, we do. Ian, would you mind coming back? Because actually we do have time for a question.
Certainly.
Ian, thank you very much for your presentation. It was very enlightening. How do people actually get from Brooklyn to the parks now? Do they walk along the road, or is it how?
Yes.
Or do they? I'm sure they won't all drive.
Once they get to the beginning of the entrance to Tenera Park, there's only a driveway. There's only a driveway. There's no footpaths there. That's why I've put that marking there to show you that we need a footpath to allow people to walk all the way down to Tenera Park, to the first park with the hockey, the second park for soccer and cricket, and then onto the third park for the dogs. That's all. At the moment, it's just a driveway, and so you're competing with cars.
So would there be enough room there to have a footpath and the road as well, or would it actually cut down on?
Well, I think there needs to be a bit of development on that. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Bank there.
Right. Thank you.
So you have to cut into the bank. But they're doing a huge footpath development just around the corner in Karipa Street at the moment. So it's possible.
Okay, thank you. Right, we might move now to Alex and Linda. Thank you.
Kia ora tātou. Happy to see you again today. We have to stop meeting like this. Thanks again for the opportunity to speak, everybody. We're obviously in strong support of this project. As we said yesterday, cycling is good for Wellington and cycling is great for Wellingtonians. These projects are you investing in climate action, which is really encouraging to see, and it aligns with several other policies and objectives. We're really in this game to see better infrastructure to enable more diversity of people choosing to ride bikes for everyday journeys. So we're here speaking on behalf of Cycle Wellington and our supporters who we want to see more safe and equitable, accessible mobility environment in our city. Cycling does all these things. So the Brooklyn Hill project has brought some new ways of working. And working on these street changes in Wellington is really encouraging. We implored the willingness of council to adapt and to see that it's trying to work on its ways of working that better incorporate feedback from the communities affected, like ours. Having listened to many of the submissions yesterday and some of them today, I think you can see hear for yourselves from people who are interested in cycling or cycle themselves that it's really having a positive impact, and the benefits that good separation can bring for people to choose that mode. So I'll hand over to Linda.
Okay, so we'd like to highlight some of the key points from our written submission. So we support the overall changes to make the transitional bike lane permanent and to improve the Brooklyn end. On Brooklyn Road, we strongly support the uphill improvements, but suggest making the cycle path wider where possible, improve the city end connections, address the downhill safety and other detailed changes. Ohiro Road, between Brooklyn Road and Cleveland Street, we support adding bike lanes, but please add separation. The entrance downhill onto Ohiro Road will encourage more speed and needs to be tighter. On Cleveland Street, we support the parking and crossing changes, but suggest improving the crossing at Washington Ave. Now, Ohiro Road, Brooklyn Road to Ardo Street, we support the changes, but they don't provide a compelling downhill option. We can see a lot to like about this iteration, and we fully support progressing most of it, but we're left feeling that there'll still be significant aspects of this route that's underserving of people on bikes. The most significant is that the downhill direction will remain the preserve of confident and assertive riders, with them needing to still contend with parked cars and risk of dooring, high speeds, mixing with large heavy vehicles or steeper gradients and tight spaces as on a lower Ohiro Road. We predict that the cycling public will generally consider this route half transformed. With such a hilly city as ours, we see that this project and several others in the emerging bike network are still to find a suitable design approach for making downhill journeys as comfortable as they need to be to attract the majority of interested but concerned people out there. With the postponing of the speed changes, a solution is pretty elusive. We understand that many streets in Wellington are tight on space, and there'll need to be places in the network where people not in cars will need to continue to share. We encourage the council to incorporate further measures to slow traffic and reduce traffic volumes than we've seen to date. For example, sharrows, as on Lower Ohiro Road, are a sad solution. We consider them not best practice, and they leave the space in a state where, as Tom Benyon explained yesterday, better than current is not really enough. Sharrows on busy roads to us falls into the category of only slightly better than what we've currently got. We note that some studies from overseas have concluded that the use of sharrows often leads to worse results overall. Other important changes we'd like to see addressed are detailed in our written submission. Thank you all again for your mahi on this.
Councillor Abdurrahman and then Councillor Chung.
Kia ora, Alex and Linda. Thank you for your submission, and it's great to read your submissions. Look, this is not about one taking all, it's about giving and taking. It's about making safer for people who bike, and it's with less convenience for those who drive, also less interruption for businesses. And you guys are not only cyclist advocates, so as a community advocate, what is the one point that you would say, okay, we know this is maybe something that we can compromise, whether it's around the bus stop or maybe some of the car parks that are getting removed. I'm putting you in the shoes of the others, so I've been asking the rest as well. It's similar kind of question, so can you touch base on that, Alex?
So many things to choose from. I guess we're left feeling a little lost because of the postponement to speed changes, because that's going to lower the temperature for all road users significantly and put less pressure on infrastructure to do more of the lifting. I'm not sure. I'd have to have a think about it.
Okay. Thank you for that, Councillor Chung.
Thank you very much, Linda and Alex. Really appreciate that. You probably heard a previous speaker talking about the speed that some riders ride down Brooklyn Hill. Do you think that would slow down if more cyclists actually went down Ohio Road, or would you have another solution for that, another suggestion?
I think the choice between the two routes is about slowing general traffic and making the space safe for people on both of them. Sharrows, I don't think, are enough on the steeper Ohio Road, and I think that there's just too many obstacles on the wider downhill of the main Brooklyn Road. So obviously more people riding is going to encourage safety in numbers. But I don't know if you're going to see a huge amount more people, especially the diversity of people coming down the hill. So.
Are you referring to, I didn't hear the previous speaker, but are you referring to bikes going too fast? Or
Yes, that's right. So sorry, Alex, I tried to make that clear. How do you actually slow down the bikes? Because it's not the obstacles that are in the way, but how do you actually get them to slow down? So that's why I'm wondering whether it's better to go down Brooklyn Road or Brooklyn Hill or Ohio Road.
I don't think that focusing on slowing cyclists is the main concern.
It'll be a concern for cars if they feel that.
It's about slowing all the traffic and the heavier traffic first. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you.
I think I would actually like to ask another question about the downhill provision. Are you suggesting we could usefully do a 30-kilometre-an-hour situation on Brooklyn Hill? And if so, what would be your parameters around that? Where would you be suggesting?
I think it's about continuing to work on things like introducing speed reductions and seeing what works and seeing what actually brings people the comfort that they need. I'm not going to settle on one particular intervention recommendation.
Do you have another suggestion? What's ideal in terms of downhill from Brooklyn to the city right now?
Separation.
Okay. All right.
Brooklyn Hill as opposed to Ohio Road, which is it's quite a rat race, and it's often kind of dark, slippery, a lot of leaves fall on. It's not a comfortable ride.
Okay.
I guess in the very short term, in terms of to your compromise question, is just making the removing the dooring risk on the downhill in the immediate term would be my number one recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Right, we are at June. We're doubling back and forth a little bit, but we'd love to hear from you now. Welcome.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. This is the first time I've ever given a submission to the Wellington Council. I've done it in Tauranga in the past, but never done it in Wellington. And one thing I will say is that it was very hard to put my thoughts together on the online submission when you could only see the first part of the sentence you were, or 3 lines of the sentence you were trying to write. So I have rewritten it, and I actually do have copies if anybody wants them. Okay, now I'm Ian Patterson Mark II. Like him, I'm mainly talking the walking, but from the point of view of a pensioner. And I will only be speaking about the parts of the plan that I have personal experience of. That is the bottom of Brooklyn Road and Aro Valley. Firstly, the crossings. At the bottom of Brooklyn Road, improvement on this crossing is long overdue. Personally, I'd like to see crossing lights here synchronised with the Webb Street lights, but I can imagine the uproar from the drivers if the council thought of that. In the current situation there, it is very, very scary getting stuck on that piddly little island between two convoys of trucks, one behind you and one in front of you, knowing that the arrow signs on the ends of those islands are regularly knocked over by traffic. So you feel very, very exposed. My flat overlooks this crossing and I use it frequently myself. I'm always scared that I will see one of those frail elderly people who shuffle across the road with their walking sticks or their frames at this sort of a rate, knocked over at the rate that everything comes both up and down there. And some of them I know don't look or can't see. And if the Webb Street traffic lights change when the bus is near to coming, not even at the bus stop, I will miss it because it is gone before I can safely cross the road. I put a note in here. I would question the safety of raised crossings for cyclists. As a long-term cyclist myself in the past, I used to avoid raised bumps in the road if I could. Okay, Brooklyn Road, opposite the entrance to Central Park. A safe pedestrian crossing is essential outside a large park, especially when it has a children's playground in it. The bus stops that serve the park entrance also serve one of the most densely populated areas in Wellington, with many of the occupants of the council flats there being disabled, sight impaired, or frail elderly. They need safe access to public transport. The bottom of the Ohio Road crossing. Now, this one has bugged me ever since I've moved into the area. Creating a proper crossing at the bottom of Ohio Road is also long overdue. The small shopping centre and coffee bars in Aro Valley service quite a large area, and I often see people with walking frames or a blind cane that I know come from Central Park flats up there. The Ohio Road crossing is a T intersection, which makes it hard to cross there with cars coming from three directions, one of them always behind the pedestrian. I know I'm going to be slow walking across the road, and I can't speed up to take evasive action. Whichever way I cross, there are cars coming from behind me, which is increasingly dangerous because of the proliferation of silent e-vehicles that can't be heard and can't be seen either, because you can't look left, right, and backwards at the same time. Also, putting cyclists down there increases the need for a safe crossing for people who are walking, who might be disabled. Now, secondly, the bus stop changes. As I understand the map provided by the council, there is a proposal to remove two fairly close bus stops on the upper part of Brooklyn Road Hill and build a new bus stop halfway between them. Now, this may seem logical if you're looking at a perfectly flat Google map, but it does not take any account of why the bus stops were put where they are in the first place, where the density of the population is, or the steepness of the hill. It might not seem a long distance to the next stop to an able-bodied planner, but if you have arthritic knees, climbing up the hill is painful and going down it is a health and safety hazard because of the danger of trips and falls. Removing the bus stops outside the Barclay-Dallard flats and the entrance to Central Park, or moving them further up the hill, which gets...
June, you will need to we have run out of time, so you'll just need to make your last points.
Yeah, I'll finish this point and I'll leave the one about buses. It ends up eliminating all public transport availability for many of the mobility compromised and vision impaired people at the Central Park Barclay Dallard complex. These are the people for whom the bus stop was put there in the first place, according to long-term residents of the complex. Also, it does not make sense to move the bus to the Central Park entrance away from the Central Park entrance. Now, I have two more points which I will leave.
And we can, if you wish to leave a copy of your revised submission, we can table that as part of our minutes. So thank you for that. And thank you for the points you've made.
Okay.
Thank you. It's much appreciated, your time. Now, I think we're moving to Chris, if he's here, Chris Studfield. Is he online? Okay.
Can you hear me?
We can.
All
Welcome,
right.
Chris.
Can you see me?
You have 5 minutes, and it needs to include time for questions if you wish.
Right, yeah. Well, here we go again, trying to inject some common sense and sanity into council planning and decision making. Now, the South Coast Business and Promotion Association is effectively opposed to the Brooklyn proposals in their entirety, almost. What began as a useless invasive temporary cycleway has now evolved into another example of the urban vandalism that's starting to become a bit of a trademark of the current council. But let's move on. The cycleway. Figures tell us that it has not increased cycle use and is therefore a failure. It is also completely underutilised and unused. It is time to get rid of it. And please do not waste any more public money trying to make it work. We should reinstate our overtaking lane on Brooklyn Road so as to alleviate long lines of traffic that now create backup problems on Washington Avenue intersection. If you've ever watched some cyclists heaving their way up Brooklyn Hill, you just know that it must be their first and last attempt at mode shift. On a positive note, I think the idea of a sharrow down a higher road from Brooklyn Road to Arrow Street is a good one. And if you make it easy for cyclists to get down that stretch of road, it should also be possible for them to make their way back up it as well. Cycleway problem solved. The raised pedestrian crossings proposed for Brooklyn Road, Ohio Road and the Cleveland-Washington intersection are simply bizarre. I don't know what you were thinking, if you were thinking at all. Putting raised crossings on a main arterial road plied by large dump trucks and articulated vehicles is a complete recipe for disaster. And it offers a serious safety threat. I mean, if you can imagine a lump of concrete with rebar sticking out of it, it can do a hell of a lot of damage. So I would suggest that those raised pedestrian crossings are shelved and you completely reassess the situation. Car parking on Brooklyn Road, Ohio Road and within the township should be retained. Give the businesses on these bloody routes a break. Maintain and expand the access and parking customers require. On a positive note, installation of additional mobility parks is something we would support. Now, when it comes to your questionnaires and the figures that you rely on for decisions, you need to know SurveyMonkey is easily manipulated by the lunatic fringe of the cycling community, and it therefore offers misleading and meaningless figures.
Thank you.
Are you there?
Oh, yes, I was just asking you to be just a little bit respectful when talking about other community groups and people who have, various views.
Rightio, okay. But at the end of the day, these figures are meaningless. And if they replace full consultation and engagement with local businesses and organisations, then they're a failure. And the consultation to date has been close to zero. And I think any special consideration extended to Cycle Action Network in the way of regular meetings should also be extended to other affected parties. It's called democratic representation, and it involves understanding the will of the majority. I think it's now obvious that the mayor and politically affiliated councillors will just get on and vote for anything thrown at them.
Okay.
As long as it's sprinkled with green pixie dust and approved by political
Chris,
masters.
I think we probably got that point, but again, can you be respectful?
Okay. Well, I believe, therefore, that the council officers and attendant consultants are letting us down. You're failing to perform your duties, basically, under the LGA. Let me make it perfectly clear. Most Wellingtonians do not want 15-minute ghettos. We do not want climate lockdown, and we do not want to be greenwashed and railroaded. It is not your job to tell us when or how we can use our cars, and it's certainly not your job to try and force us out of them.
Okay. You'll need to make your last point.
Right. Your job is to ensure that we can get from A to B in our cars with a minimum of fuss and delay. Get on with the jobs that we pay you to do, attend to the infrastructure, give us climate resilience, and ensure we have a vibrant city that attracts rather than destroys business. Over and out.
Thank you. Right. Do we have
any questions?
Questions? I don't think so. I think you have made your points very clear, and thank you for your time. Yes.
Thank you for the opportunity.
We've heard what you've had to say. Thank you, Chris.
All right.
Moving on. We have Patrick.
Good morning, councillors, and good morning to people watching online. Firstly, I'm pretty upset about that. This is not a political plaything, right? This is a basic function of council, is to protect people in our community as they get around. This is not a laughing matter, and I really feel for your staff and for councillors who have to deal with this kind of the kind of feedback that you've heard occasionally. You shouldn't have to deal with that, and neither should your staff. Let's get on with it. So what we're talking about today is completing the upgrade of Brooklyn Road and some of the surrounding streets. Please get on with it. Cycling Action Network, on behalf of 1.5 million people in New Zealand who ride bikes, strongly supports this. It's consistent with your goals for safety, for equity, for well-being, for transport decongestion, and climate action. This is a step that you can take today to make all of those outcomes better for everyone in our community. I want to acknowledge all the other submitters. I think it's really valuable to hear that kind of detailed feedback from people who are living and using these streets from day to day, particularly, the bus stop relocation outside the Barclay Dallard flats, really important point there. So this is a good step in the right direction to make it easier for people to get around our city by walking, using the bus, scooting and cycling. Just a few details here on our submission, just to highlight a few of the things in the submission that Can has made. We're a bit sceptical about the downhill biking on Ohiro Road. The level of service is lower than on Brooklyn Road, so I'm not sure you'll achieve what you're after there. Raised crossings at side streets is a really helpful measure that you can use to calm traffic down as it enters Brooklyn Road, and also improves the level of service for people walking there. Cycling down Brooklyn Road is still a risk. There is a flush median down there, and I just suspect that some people driving will use the flush median to use it illegally to overtake people on bikes, nudging people on bikes towards that dangerous door zone. So one of the things you can do to reduce risk there is to review the car parking on the downhill side of Brooklyn Hill to make sure it's not producing a risk there. Just in closing before questions, keep your eyes on the prize. Council is about governance. We're not road designers. You have experts to do that. You hear from locals with their detailed feedback to make adjustments in the plan. But I'd encourage you as councillors not to kind of micromanage the street design of every street in Wellington. Again, your job as governance is to make sure the City Council delivers what you've promised to do and to get on with it. Thank you, and any questions?
Thanks, Patrick, as always. I think one of the themes that's emerged for me is the opportunity we may be missing to improve walking at the same time that we're improving cycling. Would you have any comments to make on that in this particular context?
Sure. So I talked about raised crossings at side streets to improve the level of service walking. Also access for bus stops. That's also a key determinant of walking trips, is bus stops in the right places. Alex commented earlier on safer speeds throughout Wellington, so we'll see that come back to the council in due course. It's one of the best ways to make our streets safe and attractive for everyone using them.
Okay, thank you. And we do have some other questions too. So I think I saw Ray's hand up, and Councillor Chung's and Councillor Abdurrahman.
Again, thanks very much, Patrick. I'll just address one thing at a time, because I think that there are a lot of questions that I've had from previous speakers, but I actually find that as a pedestrian, I like raised crossings, but as a cyclist, I'm not so keen on them. So one of the questions that I heard about this, or one of the speakers I heard about this morning, was the speed that riders ride down Brooklyn Hill. Yes. So what can we actually do about that? And the second thing is that you're talking about motorists overtaking cyclists coming down Brooklyn Hill. So if we allowed cyclists to actually ride in the bus lanes, then would that make it safer rather than motorists going into the bus lane and undertaking cyclists?
Sorry, which bus lanes are these?
Oh, sorry. There was mention that motorists are going into the bus lane to pass cyclists.
No, into the flush median.
Oh, I see. Yep. Okay.
It's an illegal manoeuvre, but you'll observe people doing it.
Okay. All right. Okay.
So I guess, we keep thinking about these questions. What are the problems that we're trying to solve here? So it's keeping our streets safe for everyone using them. Naturally, going downhill, people will be going a little faster than they will uphill, quite a lot faster in some cases. Everyone on our streets has to obey the speed limit, so that's currently 50k going down Brooklyn Hill. And people on bikes should be obeying that speed limit the same as everyone else. Because the relative speeds downhill are more similar, there's really no need for people to be overtaking going down Brooklyn Hill.
Thank you. We have used up the time. I'm sorry, Councillor Abdurrahman. We need to keep moving, so thank you, Patrick. It's appreciated.
Thank you very much.
We have used the time. Yes, sorry. We'll move to Karen. I believe she is here. Welcome, Karen.
Thank you. Hello. Before I start, I want to point out an error I made in my written submission. I got my easts and wests back to front in the Brooklyn Road comments section at the top of page 130. It was the second to last sentence, and it should read, people walking down the east side can cross Washington Avenue east to west outside number 1 Washington Avenue, where the line of sight for traffic from both sides is excellent. I'd got it written the wrong way round, so it didn't make sense at all. Okay, and next I have some comments to make on obtaining information to prepare my submission. I did the click and drag to compare images of the streets that were provided, and they were really helpful to envisage the changes, where you went from the existing situation to what the new one was. It was a good visual representation. However, as the project is called Brooklyn Connections, I was disappointed and frustrated to discover that there was no printed reference copy of the project documentation held at the Brooklyn Library. Viewing and studying the document plans on a computer screen for me was unpleasant. The whole plan wasn't visible on the screen, and trying to scroll up and down, the whole plan would whiz away and I'd find myself looking at a completely different plan. And when I enlarged the image to be able to read the small print, then I couldn't get the overall picture. I attempted to print out the maps, both at home and at the library, and neither worked. And on the plans, the greying out of the surrounding buildings and landscape on the plans made it near impossible for me to work out the exact locations of the features such as the changed bus stops, pedestrian crossings and speed humps. I couldn't quite work out where they were to get a, without having to start walking down and around the streets. My thoughts about the Brooklyn Connections project is that I do not see the need for many of the proposed changes and their concomitant expenditure. I'm not commenting on the cycleways as such. I don't cycle. I did try about 15 years ago and only made one attempt, and that was it. I sold the bike. I bought it secondhand thinking I might do it, but with Wellington's hilly roads and narrow streets, I haven't ridden a bike since childhood, so that was out. I do not find it difficult to get around or cross the roads. I'm very familiar with the streets in this project. I've lived in Cleveland Street for 40 years. I used to walk or bus to work in Newtown in the city, and but I'm retired. I'm not out in peak hours, so I don't have that problem of having to cross heavy traffic. Most of the points I made in my written submission have been commented, excuse me, my mouth's going dry, have been commented on by other submitters, so I will just make a few comments on some of the changes there. Oh, thank you. I don't feel there's any need for speed humps. Drivers don't travel the road length at a constant slow speed. They accelerate and decelerate as they travel along. I don't like driving over raised humps in the road unless they have a long ramp to smooth it out and make it less bumpy. Both Ohio and Brooklyn roads are streets with few houses and people with few distractions and interruptions, and so I actually find them a joy to drive along in the car smoothly. Slowing down in anticipation of an oncoming vehicle when approaching the curves and blind bends near the bottom of Ohio Road is self-preservation. I don't need 6 humps to remind me to slow down. And I find the multitude of colours, graphics and lines painted on the road distracting. An example of this is in the click and drag image of the new raised zebra crossing between Central Park and Berkeley Dallard Flats. And I prefer to find my own places to cross a road rather than have a motorist have to stop their journey for me on a crossing. The T sections are one of my the T sections at the intersections of Cleveland, Washington, Brooklyn, and Ohio. These are all T junctions, as was mentioned before, and appear to cause vehicles to turn out that you'd have to stop further back. And it's actually hard to see because obviously living in Cleveland Street, I go up Cleveland Street and I turn left to right, and it is hard because the road's going up and there's parked cars, and you have to actually move out into the intersection to get a clear view. So, yeah, I know.
Really sorry, as you've noticed, we are running out of time.
Okay, thank you.
That's right. Do you have a final point you would like to make quickly?
Not
No,
really.
no. But we've appreciated hearing from you, and thank you for coming to give us your feedback. Right, so we have Ruth, Dr. Ruth Fisher-Smith. Welcome, Ruth.
Tēnā koutou, and thank you for having me. I'm a resident of Mornington, Brooklyn area, Omaroro historically, and a very involved community member in that community. I'm also an immigrant to Aotearoa myself originally, and an earthquake refugee from Ototahi once upon a time, and a council staff as well. So I really appreciate, not now, but previously, just want to appreciate your participation in this civic process. It's really important. So thanks for hearing me. My submission was in favor of the proposed changes, almost fully in favor. I am less concerned, as others have said, with the specific design and more with the direction of change that you're proposing. I just think it's really important to plan for options beyond cars and to give people those options. It's more equitable than forcing everyone into car ownership, and it also helps people be more resilient for the future, which we know is changing, whether we want to admit it or not, in terms of what we can do and how many materials we can take out of the earth. It's also a really big part of intergenerational good. So as we age, we tend to have more money. That's not exclusive across the population, but so cycling is also really good for younger people, for younger generations who maybe can't afford a car. And it's good for mental health, is my personal experience. So I'm just a happier person when I cycle to work than when I get inside my car box and get all angry at the other drivers. One thing I did say in my submission that I think is really important is for any changes to come hand in hand with outreach to all the disenfranchised people that you've heard from. People are angry and they don't understand why there would be a change, and that is hard for anyone, no matter what point of view they come from. So really making sure that any changes come along with outreach so we don't see as much of the backlash as the poor people of Island Bay have seen, which is just, really sad and a kind of a waste of emotional energy of a lot of people, in my opinion. And then a couple things I would just probably add, just hearing from people today. It is a safety issue. I feel unsafe every day on my bike from the heavy trucks that come and go from the tip. I know it's outside the scope of this particular discussion, but I think consideration of a heavy traffic restriction away from peak hours should be considered in Wellington, so we don't have big trucks coming at the same time as we have school children and cyclists going to and from work. I also think considering some park and bus solutions down Happy Valley Road, I don't know what land is council owned there or not, or could be, so that we don't have to all cram into a small village and park there, but there's a safe solution for people to park elsewhere and get to the village, to Brooklyn Village. And I guess I would just tag on at the very end that I do have a pedestrian point of view as well. I'm a mother. I bring children from Ridgeway School to Tenera Park for footy practice, and we have to run across the intersection as fast as we can and try not to get hit. So I never feel safe crossing there, and I'm really in favor of changes. So that's all I really have to say. I'm happy to take any questions, and thanks again for undertaking this process.
Thank you. We have Councillor McNulty.
Good on, thanks for coming in today. I guess one thing that's taken me a bit by surprise is the opposition to the raised crossings. I kind of thought they were a universally liked thing, but I'm learning that there's a lot more contention around them now. So just interested in your opinion on raised crossings as a pedestrian, as a cyclist, as a motorist.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in favor of what the data shows globally that works. So if that's what the data shows, then great. I'm not opposed to raised crossings. Again, I would leave that to the professionals. I feel like people taking issue with that at this stage in a process is actually just a way for people to take issue with the changes more broadly. My personal view, fine with raised crossings. Thank you.
Just before you leave, I did have one myself. The crossing that you would like across Ohara Road, are you thinking of crossing in the same line as Brooklyn Road or across? I'm not quite sure of the geography.
Oh, I'm meaning the one that is a partial crossing right across from the doctor's office and the bus stop. Right as you come up from Ohara Road and towards the village. That's the one I'm referring to.
Okay.
I mean, my dream would be overhead stairway crossings, but I know that costs a lot, and step by step.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Right. Thank you. It has been mentioned by a few. Councillor Chung, we do have very.
Thank you very much. My question is also about that crossing. So when you said that you were actually crossing, you find it dangerous crossing to Tenera Park, is that on the pedestrian crossing, or is that?
Yeah, that's on the pedestrian crossing. So the one that is on the approach as you approach the village from the city, and you have to go halfway across and then look both ways. The most dangerous part of it is crossing towards the hillside as the cars are zipping up the hill from Brooklyn Hill, because you can't see them and they appear so fast you kind of have to race across. So that's the one I'm talking about. It's a pedestrian crossing.
Okay, I feel very strongly about people who consider it unsafe to cross crossings. So do you think it would help if we actually put more of those diamond signs before the crossing to say that there's a crossing coming up, please slow down?
I think rather than over-specifying design at this stage, it's really important to keep in mind what the core purpose of these changes are, and then to make those decisions in sequence as you move through. So maybe that's a solution, but jumping to that solution now wouldn't make sense to me. It would be more about how do you slow traffic and make it safer for people to cross there.
Yep, I agree. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We've got a couple more people and then we'll be finishing this meeting. So we've got Darcy, I think.
Kia ora koutou. Thanks for having me and providing the opportunity for me to share my thoughts. I'm not a Brooklyn resident. I've never lived in Brooklyn, despite being in Wellington for 7 years. I mostly get around the city by bicycle, but also take the bus, sometimes the train, although I recognise that's often out of the immediate city, and walk and even run, scooter, pretty much every form of transport. Apart from car, I don't own a car, and trying to drive as little as possible for a variety of reasons, some health-related, but mostly for that I believe that basically our cities are better off the less we drive cars and the less cars we have in the city. I had actually never visited Brooklyn as a suburb until the cycleway up Brooklyn Road was introduced. It's not somewhere where I, as I said, have ever lived or really have any reason to go there. However, with the introduction of the cycleway and all the positive reviews that I heard from people I know that used it, was the sole reason that I actually first visited Brooklyn as a suburb. And since then have been many times, subsequently enjoying each use of the cycleway. And also the various businesses, be it in Brooklyn or beyond, that that cycleway has enabled me to visit. My personal favourite in Brooklyn is the cinema. Been there a few times, and I think it's great being able to support independent cinema businesses, especially, which I feel like there aren't too many of, and it's actually certainly probably the closest cinema to me living in Karori, I think. Businesses beyond that the cycleway has helped me to visit as well include the Mornington Bowling Club, which of course going up the hill and then through gets you there, and then also the tip shop, which the council I sort of also support. And yeah, all that to say that that route has enabled me to visit and support all of those businesses initially for the first time and then subsequently. So yeah, thanks for having that opportunity for me to go and visit all those places. It's been a great time, and I think that my business, as well as other people's business, that the cycleway is able to bring to those places is quite important. So thanks again for that.
Thank you, Darcy. Do we have questions?
I guess
very, very clear.
Yeah, great. One other thing I just wanted to mention before questions is just kind of overall, I guess, that as I sort of talked about earlier, scope of cars and cities, and in particular car dependency. I think the cycleway so far has done a really good job, and broadly I think any just the general vision and scope for the cycleway and related infrastructure, be it for buses, pedestrians and otherwise, should really just keep in mind that I don't think it's any secret that car dependency isn't something that we want to be investing more heavily in. Quite the opposite, that we want to be really enabling options for everyone, no matter what the mode of transport, and especially those that are active.
Okay, thank you. We do have a question from Councillor Chung.
Yep.
Thanks very much, Darcy. I appreciate your time coming in. I'm just curious, you said that you're living in Karori, right?
Correct.
So when you ride down to Brooklyn, which way do you go? Like, which way do you think is the safest way of going? From Karori to, so do you go down Raroa Road and up that area and then come down Ara Street, or do you actually find it safer to go through Kelvin and come down that way?
Not really sure. I guess it would depend if I was coming straight from home or not. Often I might have maybe already been in the city or potentially in Kelburn already. In terms of safety, not really. I can't say I've really thought about it before. Often when I'm going downhill, I'm going very much close to the speed of traffic anyway. So whilst there are people that will overtake or close pass or the like, it's generally when I'm going downhill where I feel safer anyway than going uphill, say, which the cycleway, of course, has really helped with.
Good, I appreciate that. I actually ride from Karori into town quite often, and I actually ride both ways, so I'm curious to know. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we're out of time, but thank you very much.
No worries. Thank you.
Right, so we have Ah, okay. We haven't actually got Geordie. Are we able just to take a brief moment and see if we can chase that up? And if what do you? He's scheduled for 5 minutes ago. Actually, we're running 5 minutes behind time. Okay. We are actually running to a very tight schedule, so we may have to just take Geordie's written submission as read. Alrighty. Thank you, everybody, for your attention. Thank you to the very varied and eloquent submitters that we've had today. We've heard a very big variety of viewpoints, which is always good. I will now move to closing the meeting with not the karakia. We first have some general business. Right, so we're going to receive the information for both. We've got Brooklyn and, yes, we're doing it for two separate sets of submissions. So I move that we take this, sorry, this is...
Can I get clarified? This is, because this is just Brooklyn Hill? Yeah. I mean, it's not, I think they're two separate papers on the agenda. Yeah. Okay. Right.
We normally receive the submissions and thank submitters for their time. Okay, we'll just take a brief break. We will thank you formally. Don't feel, if you're in the gallery, that you need to stay for this very last bit. So, but I thank you again. You're very welcome to if you wish.
Whilst we're open for debate.
So we are able to actually ask, there has been a paper and we've heard some submissions. We are able to ask questions of officers at this point. Do I have to move?
Yeah, so you still need to off questions.
Okay, right. I think I'm with what we're doing. Sorry for the little hiccup there. So we're going to take the report as read. We've obviously heard the submissions. I will move the motion. We then have an opportunity to ask officers questions, and then we will have a seconder, and at that point we can have a debate and then we can vote. All right, so I move the motion that the Regulatory Processes Committee receives the information and hears the oral submitters and thanks them for their submissions. Just in advance, do I have a seconder for that? Thank you. We won't do that now. Would we like to ask questions of officers? Yes, okay, a couple of questions. Councillor Calvert.
I just want to know whether the officers feel that they've got enough time to digest the written submissions plus the oral submissions that we've heard over the 2 days to be able to come back to this committee. I think it's later this month on proposals.
I could probably speak to that. Yeah, I think we've got sufficient time. The papers have to be prepared for middle of next week, so that's sufficient time.
So would that mean that pretty much you've already factored in? What sort of nature of changes would you have factored in already?
Well, we would have heard for the last 2 days, and we'll take that away, and then we'll come back and propose any further changes we want to make to the traffic resolution that's been out for consultation.
Thank you.
Councillor McNulty.
Yeah, my question's just along the same line. It's just understanding if, because obviously you process some of these as they come in, have we taken any thoughts about changes to date from these being in written form? And when we go to the site visit, will we be able to point out whether things have been changed on the back of oral submissions?
I can answer the second part. So we've, Paul, you might want to answer the first part, but the second part, yeah, we'll point out where there are changes made from what we consulted on versus what finally comes before you next week.
Right, because we get a site visit, which we've offered all of the committee to come on a site visit, I think the week after next. But we've got a number of changes we've already made as a result of what we heard in the drop-on sessions and what we've seen come through the written submissions. So we've got quite a few changes, and they've hopefully addressed most of the concerns. Clearly there's a few things that we'll stay with, but we'll be able to explain that on the site visit, and you'll have the papers with you when we do the site visit.
I have to ask a question myself along similar lines. I feel as if we've heard a very rich set of information, actually. I honestly have to feel that, in my view, there do need to be some adjustments to the plans. And I guess, in particular, the feedback that we've heard about the walking, missing footpaths, some of the things about desire lines, and will there be time to incorporate some of that? And trade-offs too, because there's been some things that people have suggested are not so important that could be not done in order to fund some of the things that people have identified as important. Do we really have enough time to address some of those things?
So we've been hearing those through the drop-in sessions. I attended all of the drop-ins. Andrea's been at all of them. We've been out engaging with the community before the project. Before consultation. And so we've got a lot of that knowledge already, and the plans are changing. We're going to make lots of recommendations of things to change from that we went out and consulted on. I would be interested in just understanding if there's other things the committee would like changed that we haven't done. So maybe if there was an opportunity, I don't know how we do that, rather than amendments that come through on the day. But
sure.
Just thinking how we best do that, given that we are short of time. So we will have the committee report advanced enough to send through for approval by the end of this week. And so from that, then we start into that iteration of making changes.
Well, I have been wondering if we could suggest a meeting of the committee in an informal way to perhaps debrief a little bit from what we've heard. But anyway, we can maybe, I'll go to Councillor Paul, who had a question.
I was just going to ask about the bus stop outside Berkeley Dallard and whether the changes from the feedback from the submissions has influenced that outcome.
Oh, totally it did. I was at the drop-in session that we ran specifically with the social housing. We were in the Central Park area there, had a drop-in, and we were hearing quite clearly that residents choose to get off at Berkeley Dallard. They're quite happy to get on down at the bottom of the hill, but they get off the bus outside Berkeley Dallard. So we have since met with Metlink, and as much as they had a desire to rationalise the number of stops, they're quite acceptable to keep that one. So if that stays, then we would unpair it with a downhill. There's the very light boardings on the stop opposite Berkeley Dallard. So if we were to remove that one, equally they're happy that the relocation of the Nean Street stop down to the Sado Karate, that you would leave that one up at Nean Street. So when we bring the paper to committee at the end of the month, we're recommending that the 6 bus stops near the bottom of the hill, so the 2 down at the bottom of Nean, the 2 at Central Park, Berkeley Dallard, and the 2 at the top of Nean, of those 6 stops, only one of them changes, and that's the one downhill by Central Park, and they will be removed, and the rest will pretty much stay as they are now. So that's a big win in terms of what we heard from the community, and it was just as a result of pretty much the feedback we had from Central Park apartments and the Berkeley Dallard apartments, and supported by others in the community, but real strong from that group.
Thank you, Councillor Calvert.
I'm just curious, is why do we are we missing a step here when we're engaging with the community? I mean, should there be, before we start with the traffic resolution, is going out engaging with them from a more of a holistic perspective about the whole space, whether it be walking, buses, cycling, or vehicles, and even businesses, rather than going out, starting with a formal consultation on traffic resolutions, which can be quite technical. And I just wonder whether do you feel that you've got enough confidence in the way this process has been run from starting with a traffic resolution?
So I guess this is the first project where we've tried it the new way. So this is new. This has started with a transitional cycleway. We went out with the transitional cycleway, as we are rolling out transitional cycleways all over the city now, and we used that as our first engagement with the community. And on the basis of what we learned from that, we brought a paper back to this committee, well, a committee of council that had what we had heard and what things councillors would like us to investigate going forward. And what we heard there was that we needed to do better for pedestrians, and we think we have done that. We've certainly addressed the pedestrian concerns. And that we heard from the community and then get endorsed by committee that you wanted to extend it at either end. So we did a big piece of community engagement to kick off this project. So we started with the community, brought it back to committee, had approval, and now we're back with the answer to what we heard. So we trialled it, we asked, we heard stuff, and we've now responded to that. So we are doing exactly that longer piece of engagement. Got caught up a little bit with COVID, so it has been a bit of a gap between when we started the transitional to coming back now with the transformational project.
And did you work with the businesses?
Through the transitional, it's what we heard, and we've had that, and while we may not have worked with them, we have certainly been engaging with them.
So what's the difference between engaging and working with them?
We've met with them a number of times. We understand what their concerns are, but we haven't actually taken plans with them and co-designed. It wasn't that process. That co-design came through the transitional approach.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question? Thank you. Can I ask a question about the submission we had from the truck, the man who spoke about heavy vehicles and trucks? And has that changed your thoughts at all about the raised crossings and the appropriateness of them on the slopes?
Look, it's all. I got asked this a number of times when we're out talking with people. It's a matter of science, and it is about how we design them. We can design on the slope comfortably, and it's that trade-off between speed across the hump and the ability for a larger vehicle, including buses, and how they might go. So it's the approach gradient and the departure gradient and the height of the hump. And we'll work closely with our designers to ensure that we are designing platforms, because that ultimately we have got our pedestrians at the top of the hierarchy, and we want them to be able to cross the road safely. So it's trading that off versus trying to slow the vehicles and getting over without bumping bumping bus passengers across humps and those larger trucks. Andrea and I, so Andrea is our project manager across this, so she's been hearing this. Andrea and I met with the fire service last week. They had some concerns about the humps as well and the platforms. And again, we gave the assurance that we would work closely with FENS to make sure that the humps were designed in a way that didn't unduly slow the fire engine. They were quite comfortable, though, to slow right down to 10 to 20 kilometres an hour to go across a hump, provided there wasn't too many on the hill.
Okay.
They said it was the cumulative effect of lots of them. They can pull away from one of them and they might lose 10, 15 seconds in their journey. They were comfortable with that. But if there was lots on the hill, that would be a problem. On the flat, no problem. But just not lots on the hill. We will also be making a recommendation that the hump, not the platform, the hump at the top of Brooklyn Hill, that we would remove that from the proposal.
Okay. I think I saw Councillor Abnaraman had his hand up.
Cool. Thank you, Paul. My worry would be regards to the engagement and working with the community and the business people. What that engagement looks like. Example, how that communicated to the community and for the businesses. Is that like kind of going and handing the paper to all those businesses or calling them for a meeting, and how often that happened? When it comes to the community, is that just sending an email or addressing through the resident association, or something advertised for the community to come and engage with you, what that looks like? And yeah.
So again, part of that transitional cycleway, we went out and we engaged with the community to tell us, what the problems were, what was missing, what could we do better when we come back. So, and that was a community-wide engagement, so we've quite extensive. Admittedly, that was back in, I'm just trying to think when that was, 2020, that we got the feedback on that. So that was very extensive. Unfortunately, we would have then liked to have gone straight back with the transformational answer. We've now in 2023 coming back with that answer. Their engagement following that has been, we've been to the Residents Association to talk about the project, so not necessarily the detail of the specifics, but how we were progressing it. And then I know our engagement staff have been out meeting with individuals, again, not necessarily with plans, but more about conversations around when we could expect to see information coming forward, and so that it wasn't a surprise when we brought it out. So people were well aware that the consultation was coming up.
So to be specific, when it comes to engaging with the community back in 2022, how was that happened? Is that calling them to the meeting and meeting them somewhere, or just standing on the street and talking to the whole community? What that looks like when I go back to the community, at least if they ask me, so I have an answer.
Both of those elements, as well as online websites where people could provide their input into it. Many came to this room and spoke to councillors and told councillors their feelings of what we had built and what needed to change. So.
Right, have we got any other questions? No. All right, well, I'll invite Councillor McNulty, I believe is going to second it. Is there any debate? Is there any need for debate? Okay.
It won't come as a surprise, but I am concerned that the feedback from the businesses, just in terms of how we are doing this whole thing, and I am generally concerned about how we very focus on the transport options, but we don't focus on the placemaking and actually taking a cohesive and comprehensive look while we're making these investments in what will make the place better for all. And I think sometimes there are compromises that if it wasn't being driven purely from a transport perspective, we might get a better outcome overall. That will take a little bit of time, and I am concerned that we're just trying to proceed with this because of other reasons which I'm not quite fully aware of, but I just still think that we haven't engaged effectively with all the community on this to get a better solution. That's all.
Any further debate? No. Well, I'll give a little right of reply. I do believe that it's good that we're changing a few things. I think this is an opportunity to get it really right. I think there's a big opportunity here, a big why, as to the need for improvements, especially with walking and connectivity, and Brooklyn being such a close suburb to many schools, the city. But I do think that from what I've heard, I'd like to see some changes to the plans that were put on the table. Not major, but some fine-tuning to respond to some of the very detailed feedback we've received. So I'm going to trust that we're going to see that and be able to have it explained to us when we go on our site visit. With that, I'm going to ask you to vote. On the motion, which is to receive the information, hear the oral submitters and thank them for the Brooklyn one. Oh, we've got to do the same thing with 2.2. Oh, goodness. All right, so that was just Brooklyn. So we'd go through the same process with Thorndon. I'll move the motion. Do I have a seconder? Tam. And would anyone like to ask questions of our officers on this? I have a question, a quite important question. I would like us to have, is it possible for us to please have a copy of all the submissions in written and delivered to the councillor rooms so that we can actually see all the written submissions for this?
I think we've provided them already.
It's there?
Yep.
Okay, and is it possible, because they are very redacted, which makes it hard for us to understand the perspective of the person giving the information, is it possible without unredacting them for an indication to be given of the person's connection to Thorndon Quay or Hutt Road? Like, are they a resident? Do they travel through it?
Have you? I'm trying to think. Sorry, I'm trying to think if we've given you the engagement report. I think we've given you the.
We have the engagement report.
All those demographics in it.
Okay. However, when you're looking at all the individual submissions, it's really hard.
Well, this is the balance we have between protecting.
Yeah, but we don't do that with our own submitters. Sure. It's quite transparent where they come from and where they live.
So I'll take a look at the engagement report and see if it's got that information. It will be at a theme level, though. I'll also see if we can get an unredacted version.
I have to be really honest, and I'll say this in debate. It's not a question, but yeah. Okay, and the other thing I'd like to ask is it possible for us to go on a site visit for Thorndon and Quay and Hutt Road? And can we do that relatively soon?
We can organise that.
Okay, those are my questions. Do we have any others? Councillor Calvert.
So has the traffic resolutions been formally advertised as yet?
I'll need to check on that, Councillor Calvert.
Our officers have full confidence that doing this hearing submissions before the traffic resolutions have been formally advertised meets the requirements of all legislative processes?
So we have responded to that already. So in terms of sufficient for consultation purposes, yes. The legal descriptions and the way, so the plans that we were put out provided sufficient detail for consultation purposes. The legal descriptions is to meet the requirements of our traffic bylaw.
So for consultation purposes, but what about for decision making? Is this going to put the council in an unusual situation because we've actually not advertised resolutions, which as we know, the normal process is we advertise them effectively, and then we have the hearings, then we make a decision.
No, the process we followed is the same as the process we followed before. The publication of the legal descriptors meets the requirements of the 14 days before you're hearing them. So the advice we've been given is that it does not increase any risk for council in making this decision.
And so can you tell me when we asked the public for their views on changes to Thorndon Quay, November, December last year, and we indicated that we would hear those submissions in February this year, what has been the reason for the delay?
It wasn't in February. That was, the date was Americanized. The date that you were reading off was Americanized, so it was actually supposed to read August, but it read 8.
I'm pretty sure I saw February. In the first meeting in February, I'm pretty sure that was in the generic submission form.
I'll go and check that.
Because so regardless, why has it taken so long, given that when you think about, we've just had Brooklyn, which was consulted on June, July, and we're hearing them now. Why has it taken 8 months for us to hear submitters?
Because we needed to get the funding decision from you before we came back for the traffic resolution decision. Because we couldn't bring a traffic resolution without having the funding for the project agreed.
So why didn't the funding decision come sooner? I mean, I wonder why, knowing that you needed then a funding. No, just let me finish. Knowing that you needed a funding decision to give effect to traffic resolutions, why did the program go out and consult on traffic resolutions when it didn't have funding?
I know. That's it's your question about why the funding decision didn't come sooner. So the funding decision didn't come sooner because we wanted to make that funding decision as one package for Thorndon Quay and Golden Mile. So in terms of wrapping that all into the annual plan process, it made sense to bring those to council together.
I think we will move on, and if there are okay.
With the privacy statement for LGWM, has that changed so we wouldn't get redacted submissions in future?
So I think we can provide redacted submissions on the basis that there is no forwarding of those to anyone. Obviously, there's just some increased sensitivity around that at the moment.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, did you say we can provide unredacted submissions?
I'll ask if we can get.
It would be honestly helpful for us to form a view, and I think that is our responsibility as a committee. Are there any other questions? Okay, right. Well, in that case, I will introduce this. We have heard from Thorndon Quay. I wish I felt that we'd heard as much detailed information as we've heard from Brooklyn, but maybe that's just the situation with a local road and set of roads rather than a big major road. Nevertheless, we have heard some information. I'm looking forward to getting the full set of information that the Let's Get Wari Moving program received so that we can make a better assessment based on the written submissions, because I feel that we didn't actually hear a lot from the oral submitters, and no doubt that's a function a little bit of the time delay as well between them making their submission and then getting the chance to speak to us. However, we've been through a process, and I think we can make it a reasonable process. Right. You're seconding it, yes. You're reserving, right. Is there any other debate? No? Do you? Okay, well.
Look, I think the reason we didn't hear so detailed responses from the submitters on Thorndon Quay is they submitted last year, but when I spoke to a number of them, they didn't realise it was a traffic resolution. It's certainly, whilst if you read the small print, you might have seen the occasional mention of a traffic resolution, but it wasn't clear at that point. And then to make a submission in November, December, and then expect to then appear before us in August and expect them to recall what they said and the rationale behind it when things, when it was 8 months. And it's a process, but we're refitting the process. We've done these many times before, and I am absolutely, I'm just trying to pick my words carefully, but we are now going ahead and advertising the traffic resolution because we haven't done it before now. But I almost feel that we are going to reach an outcome that's already been determined. And I don't think that we should be accepting this in this way. I am really, really upset by the whole thing because we're asking people to take part in a process and that we are fair and we're running a democratic organisation. This is not fair. And I just think, we're just carrying on and we're just finding loopholes and ways to get through this. So I am not comfortable with this whole process, and I know many submitters aren't. I mean, this is just 8 months from when they lodged their submissions, and to find out that the reason is delay is because they were waiting for funding. Well, we should have got the funding sorted first, knowing that we could even do this work. So I understand why a lot of people probably didn't even bother wanting to turn up because they think this is a fait accompli.
Right. Tam. Councillor Paul.
I just wanted to say a big thank you to all of the submitters for coming to talk to us and for giving their insights on both Brooklyn Hill and Thorndon Quay. Thorndon Quay in particular is one of the busiest cycle routes in Wellington. It's a key route, you can't get around it if you're coming in from the Hutt or from Petone, so it's really critical, and it was really helpful and insightful to have all of the feedback on how we can make this work in real life. So I hope that people who've come to submit feel appreciated for the insights that they've brought us, and I'm looking forward to getting on with the work and making this route safer, because you know, a majority of bus routes also go down this down Thorndon Quay too. So the changes that we're proposing to make are going to make it safer for cyclists, it's going to make it better for walkers, and it's going to make it more efficient for the buses. So let's just get on with it and get it done.
Thank you, Tam. Is there any further debate? Councillor McNulty.
Just very quickly, I hope officers might be able to revisit the feedback from the Childcare Centre. We do have to build social licence in these projects, so whilst I think 99% of cyclists are probably using that lane appropriately, it will only take 1% or one person to bowl into a father with kids or mother with kids going into that centre to ruin that social licence. So if there is anything from that really specific feedback we heard yesterday, just to make sure that there's safe entry in and out of that childcare centre, I think we're just building a better social licence across the city, and we're not pitting groups against each other. So that was the only thing that stood out. Otherwise, I thank officers for the work, and that's me.
Further debate? Okay, just responding to some of that. Yes, thank you, Councillor Paul. This is a really important route. I personally can't wait to see the cycleway connected. But I am also aware that there was some feedback. Thank you, Councillor McNulty, for mentioning the Childcare Centre. That's why I think it's very important that we get the full written set of submissions as soon as we can, so that we can look through them and see if there's anything else that we wish to ask officers about between now and whenever it is that we make the decision. But thank you to everyone who's come today. Thank you to our officers. Thank you to my support team here. I'm aware of how much you do to make this run smoothly, and it's not easy being put on the spot with 5 minutes, and not easy for people who are submitting with 5 minutes, but I think we've done very well sharing a lot of information under that sort of time frame. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up.
Ask the two to be taken separately, please?
Yes, absolutely. So we'll vote first on number 1, which is to receive the information. That's carried, and now we'll do number 2. And that is carried. Right, well, thank you, everybody. I will now close with the karakia. Una here, una here, una here, ki te uru tapanui, kia wātia, kia māma, te ndako, te tinana, te wairua, I te ara takatu, koe rā I rongo, aria aki ki runga, kia wātia, ai rā, kua wātia. Thank you, everyone.
Maroke.